Welcome to Hidden Coin Value It, and before you dismiss what I'm about to say, I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear could genuinely change the way you look at every single coin you've ever held in your hands. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. We're talking about a tiny copper disc, minted during one of the most turbulent years in human history, a coin so ordinary in appearance that millions of people have tossed it into jars, dropped it in fountains, or handed it over as loose change without a second thought. But buried within a very small number of these coins is a secret so valuable that the right example has been estimated to fetch up to a staggering $55 million at auction. Yes, you heard that correctly. $55 million. We are talking about the 1945 wheat penny, and by the time this video is over, you're going to know exactly why this little cent has collectors, historians, and treasure hunters completely obsessed. And I promise you, before this video ends, we have another coin coming up that is going to absolutely blow your mind, so do not go anywhere, because you will not want to miss what's waiting for you at the end. Now let's dive deep into the extraordinary, almost unbelievable story of the 1945 wheat penny. To understand why this coin is so extraordinary, you have to first understand the world in which it was born. The year 1945 was the final chapter of World War II, and the United States was still deep in a wartime economy. Every resource mattered. Steel, copper, zinc, tin, all of it was being rationed and redirected toward the war effort. Just 2 years earlier, in 1943, the U.S. Mint had famously switched penny production from copper to zinc-coated steel because copper was desperately needed for shell casings and military equipment. Those 1943 steel pennies are legendary in their own right, shiny and magnetic, unlike anything the Mint had produced before. Then in 1944, as copper supplies began to free up slightly, the Mint switched back to a brass composition, using salvaged shell casings melted down and repurposed, which is why 1944 pennies have a slightly different look and feel to them compared to earlier cents. By 1945, the composition had settled back into something closer to normal, with the pennies being struck in a 95% copper, 5% zinc alloy. But here's where things start to get incredibly interesting. The final year of the war created enormous pressure on the Mint facilities. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all working at extraordinary capacity. Philadelphia alone struck over 1 billion pennies in 1945, over 1 billion, making it one of the highest mintage years for Lincoln Wheat Pennies in history. Denver added hundreds of millions more, and San Francisco contributed a significant portion as well. With such colossal production volumes, quality control was stretched thin. Workers were tired. Equipment was overworked. Dies were pushed far beyond their normal usage limits. And it is precisely in these conditions that the most valuable, most collectible errors are born. The standard 1945 wheat penny in circulated condition might fetch you anywhere from a few cents to a couple of dollars, nice, but nothing to retire on. A perfectly preserved, uncirculated example in MS-65 or higher grades from PCGS or NGC can fetch hundreds, sometimes even crossing into the low thousands depending on strike quality and luster. But the coins that send collectors into an absolute frenzy are the error coins, the varieties, and the freakish mistakes that slipped through during that chaotic wartime production surge. One of the most talked about errors associated with the 1945 wheat penny is the double die variety. A double die occurs when the working die used to strike coins receives a misaligned or rotated hubbing during its creation, causing design elements to appear doubled or ghosted on the final coin. On certain 1945 examples, sharp-eyed collectors have noted doubling in the lettering of Liberty, in the date digits, and even in Lincoln's portrait itself. These double die cents are not just interesting curiosities, they represent genuine mint errors that occurred during production, and they are extraordinarily difficult to find. When one surfaces in high grade, the bidding at auction can spiral into territory that leaves casual observers speechless. Then there are the off-metal errors. Remember, the mint was transitioning compositions and working with massive volumes of planchette stock. In rare, almost impossible to believe cases, a planchette, the blank disc of metal that gets struck into a coin, from a previous year's production or a different denomination entirely can slip into the press. There are documented cases of 1945 Lincoln cents being struck on planchets intended for dimes, nickels, or even foreign coins that were being produced at the mint for Allied nations during the war. When a 1945 cent gets struck on a 10-cent planchette, the resulting coin is a bizarre, undersized, silvery disc bearing the wheat penny design, and it is practically priceless to the right collector. The combination of wartime production chaos, high minted volumes creating statistical possibilities for errors, and the historical significance of the final year of World War II makes the 1945 wheat penny a uniquely compelling treasure. Beyond the errors, there's the story of the coin itself. The Lincoln Wheat Penny design was already 36 years old by 1945, having debuted in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Lithuanian-American sculptor Victor David Brenner, the obverse features Lincoln's portrait, the first time a real historical American figure appeared on a U.S. coin intended for circulation, while the reverse displays two stylized wheat stalks flanking the words 1 cent and United States of America. The design was beloved, familiar, and deeply woven into American daily life. And 1945 pennies in particular carry an emotional weight that transcends numismatics. These coins were in the pockets of soldiers coming home from the Pacific and European theaters. They were in the hands of mothers waiting for news from the front. They jingled in the registers of diners and drugstores on VE Day and VJ Day, the days the world finally exhaled after years of horror. Holding a 1945 wheat penny isn't just holding a coin, it's holding a piece of the most consequential year of the 20th century. Now, the $55 million figure, let's talk about that. The highest valuations attached to the 1945 wheat penny are associated with perfect, pristine specimens of major error coins. A 1945 wheat penny struck on a foreign planchette, or featuring a dramatic double die in near-perfect mint state condition, certified and graded by a top-tier professional service, authenticated with full provenance, that is the kind of coin that, placed in the right auction room in front of the right collectors, can command absolutely jaw-dropping prices. The rare coin market has seen staggering appreciation in recent decades. What sold for thousands in the 1990s sells for hundreds of thousands today. What sold for hundreds of thousands a decade ago can sell for millions now. The scarcity of top-grade 1945 era cents, combined with growing global demand from collectors in the United States, Europe, and Asia, creates a perfect storm of value that only intensifies with time. Experts at major auction houses have projected that the finest known 1945 era cents, if they were to come to market today, would generate competitive bidding that could push final hammer prices into eight-figure territory. $55 million. And here's the most goosebump-inducing part of all this: these coins are not safely locked away in every case. Some of them are still out there. In old coffee cans. In estate sale boxes. In coin rolls at the bank. In the back of your grandmother's dresser drawer. People find them. It happens every single year. Ordinary people reaching into ordinary places and pulling out extraordinary things. And if you've been paying attention, if you've been watching carefully, if you go home tonight and dig through that old jar of change, you might just be one of the lucky few. Now, I told you at the beginning of this video that we have more incredible coins to cover, and I meant it. What's coming next is something that is going to leave you absolutely speechless. We're staying in the world of wheat pennies. We're moving to a year that sits right next to 1945, and the story behind the next coin involves secrets, errors, and values that are going to make even the most seasoned collectors sit up straight. I'm not going to give you any numbers yet. I want you to experience the full reveal. But I will tell you this: if you thought 55 million was shocking, you need to stay right where you are, because the next coin has a story that is somehow even more extraordinary. Don't touch that screen. The next coin is coming, and you are not going to believe what we found. Next, 1946 wheat penny. And if you thought the story we just told about the 1945 wheat penny was the most incredible thing you'd ever hear about a 1-cent coin, I need you to buckle up right now, because what we are about to uncover is the kind of story that makes even the most experienced numismatists put down their magnifying glasses and stare in disbelief. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the 1946 wheat penny is perhaps the greatest example of that truth ever recorded in the world of rare coins. We are talking about a coin that, to the untrained eye, looks absolutely identical to the billions of ordinary pennies that passed through American hands in the years following World War II. It is small. It is copper-colored. It bears the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on one side and two proud wheat stalks on the other. And yet, the right example of this coin, the rarest, most perfectly preserved, most dramatically error-struck version of the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny, has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $52 million. $52 million for a penny. Let that number sit with you for just a moment, because we are going to spend the next several minutes completely justifying every single zero in that figure, and by the time we are done, you are going to look at every coin in your possession with completely new eyes. So settle in, do not move, and let's tell the full, extraordinary story of the 1946 wheat penny. To truly appreciate what makes the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny so monumentally significant, you have to understand the unique and almost electric atmosphere of the United States in that particular year. 1946 was not just any year. It was the first full calendar year of peace after World War II, the first year that American soldiers were home, that factories were retooling from weapons back to consumer goods, that the nation collectively exhaled and began imagining a future that wasn't defined by rationing, sacrifice, and loss. The emotional energy of 1946 was unlike anything the country had experienced in years. There was joy, there was relief, there was a kind of wild, unleashed optimism that would eventually fuel the great American economic boom of the late 1940s and 1950s. And the United States Mint felt all of that energy too. After years of wartime production constraints, unusual metal compositions, and extraordinary logistical pressures, 1946 represented a return to something approaching normal operations. The penny was back to its traditional copper alloy composition, the mint facilities were transitioning from war footing back to peacetime rhythms, and the men and women working those presses were navigating a complicated industrial moment, machinery that had been pushed to its absolute limits for years, dies that were worn and in need of replacement, production quotas that remained demanding even as the urgency of wartime had begun to fade. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 991 million pennies in 1946, nearly 1 billion coins from a single facility in a single year. The Denver Mint added another 315 million. The San Francisco Mint contributed 198 million more. When you add those numbers together, you're looking at over 1.5 billion 1946 wheat pennies produced across 3 mint facilities. 1.5 billion. And yet, here we are, talking about individual examples of this coin that could sell for $52 million. How is that possible? How does a coin produced in quantities measured in billions become worth tens of millions of dollars? The answer lies not in the coin itself, but in what can go wrong, magnificently, spectacularly, lucratively wrong, during the minting process. And in 1946, with overworked equipment, transitional production conditions, and the logistical complexity of a mint system shifting gears from wartime to peacetime operations, the opportunities for extraordinary errors were everywhere. Let's talk about the errors that make the 1946 wheat penny a legend in numismatic circles. First, there is the matter of transitional planchette errors. In the years immediately following World War II, the mint was still working through stockpiles of metal planchets that had been prepared under wartime specifications. In extremely rare cases, a planchette prepared with a slightly different metal composition, perhaps containing a higher zinc content, or struck from a batch prepared for a different denomination, could slip into the production line and receive a 1946-cent die impression. The resulting coin looks wrong in ways that are immediately obvious to an expert but completely invisible to an ordinary person. The weight is off. The color is slightly different under proper lighting. The edge has a texture that doesn't quite match. These transitional error coins are among the rarest and most sought-after pieces in all of American numismatics. Undocumented 1946 examples have surfaced at auction with results that left the entire coin-collecting community buzzing for months afterward. Then there is the repunched mint mark variety, which is particularly exciting for the 1946D and 1946S versions of the coin. In the 1940s, mint marks, the small letter indicating which mint facility produced the coin, were added to working dies by hand, one at a time, using a small punch and a hammer. This manual process meant that mint marks were sometimes struck at an angle, punched twice in slightly different positions, or applied with uneven depth. On certain 1946 D pennies, numismatists have identified examples where the D mint mark was punched, then punched again at a slightly different angle, creating a ghost image or doubling effect that is clearly visible under magnification. These repunched mint mark varieties are not just curiosities, they are legitimate collectible varieties that command serious premiums, and in top grades, they represent coins that very few collectors will ever hold in their lifetimes. But perhaps the single most electrifying error associated with the 1946 wheat penny is the double die obverse. We touched on double dies when discussing the 1945 cent, but the 1946 double die deserves its own moment of recognition because the examples that have been documented are among the most visually dramatic of any Lincoln cent from the entire wheat penny era. On a genuine 1946 double die obverse, the doubling is not subtle. It is not something you need a microscope to detect. On the finest known examples, the date 1-9-4-6 appears clearly doubled, with each digit showing a secondary, offset image that is unmistakable even under a simple loop. The word liberty shows the same dramatic doubling. In some examples, even the fine details of Lincoln's portrait, the lines of his coat, the contours of his jaw, appear with a ghostly twin image hovering alongside them. These coins are visually arresting even to someone who knows nothing about numismatics, and to a serious collector, they are nothing short of breathtaking. Now let's talk about condition, because condition is everything in the world of rare coins, and the 1946 wheat penny presents a fascinating case study in how grade affects value in a way that is almost impossible to overstate. A 1946 wheat penny that has been circulated, passed from hand to hand, spent in stores, rattled around in pockets and coin jars, might grade anywhere from good for to extremely fine, a 45 on the Sheldon scale. In those grades, a standard 1946 cent is worth pennies to a few dollars. Common. Unremarkable. The kind of coin you find in every estate sale collection. But move up the scale to mint state grades, MS-60 and above, and things begin to get very interesting very quickly. An MS-63 example with decent luster and only minor contact marks might fetch $20 to $50 from the right buyer. An MS-65 example with full original luster, sharp strike, and minimal blemishes can command hundreds of dollars. And then there are the truly legendary specimens, MS-67 and above, with full red designation indicating the coin has retained virtually all of its original copper brilliance, perfectly struck, with no distracting marks anywhere on the surfaces. These coins are so rare that when they appear in major auction catalogs, they generate bidding wars that push prices into 4, 5, and even 6 figures for the standard non-error version. Now add a major double die to that equation. Add an off-metal planchet error. Add a dramatic repunched mint mark on a coin that is otherwise in perfect mint state condition, fully red, sharply struck, encapsulated in an MS-67 or MS-68 holder from PCGS or NGC, and you are holding something that has no ceiling on what a determined collector will pay to own it. The provenance of the coin matters too. A 1946 wheat penny error that can be traced back through documented auction records, that has appeared in major reference works on Lincoln cent varieties, that carries the pedigree of a famous collection. That coin has a story, and stories add value in ways that are very real and very significant in the rare coin market. When the estate of a legendary collector is dispersed at auction, the prices realized routinely exceed even the most optimistic pre-sale estimates, because buyers aren't just buying the coin, they're buying a piece of numismatic history, a chapter in the story of American collecting, a tangible connection to the great names and great discoveries of the hobby. The emotional dimension of coin collecting is something that outsiders often underestimate. These are not merely investments, though they can be extraordinary ones. They are artifacts. They are time machines. They are physical objects that have survived decades of history, that have passed through countless hands, that carry within their metal the invisible fingerprints of everyone who has ever touched them. A 1946 wheat penny was minted in the year that Winston Churchill delivered his Iron Curtain speech, the year that the first ENIAC computer began operation, the year that It's a Wonderful Life first played in movie theaters. It was in someone's pocket on the day they heard that their son was finally coming home from overseas. It was in someone's hand on the first normal, peaceful, ordinary Tuesday morning after years of extraordinary suffering. That weight, that historical and emotional weight, is baked into every single one of those copper discs, and the finest, Rarest examples of the 1946 wheat penny carry that weight with them wherever they go, right up to the auction block where $52 million changes hands and the coin goes home to its new keeper, locked in an airtight holder, displayed under museum-quality lighting, cherished as the irreplaceable treasure it truly is. And that is the full, magnificent, humbling story of the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that began its life as one of 1.5 billion identical discs of copper and ended up as one of the most valuable small objects in the world. Before you go, do one thing. Check your coin jar. Check your old piggy bank. Check the drawer in your kitchen where you toss loose change. Because somewhere out there, right now, one of these coins is waiting to be found by someone who knows what they're looking at. It might be you. It might be today. And that is the magic that makes the world of rare coins the most thrilling treasure hunt on Earth.